Today, I am super excited to welcome a very special guest, Sarah Strommen, Commissioner of the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources. Since 2019, Sarah has led an organization of nearly 2,700 employees, dedicated to conserving Minnesota's natural resources, expanding outdoor recreation opportunities, and ensuring these incredible places remain available for future generations. Before becoming commissioner, Sarah built an impressive career in conservation and public service, serving in leadership roles with the DNR, the Board of Water and Soil Resources, Friends of the Boundary Waters Wilderness, and the Minnesota Land Trust. She also served as mayor of Ramsey, Minnesota, where I was a police officer for 12 years.
In Minnesota, we have among the most rigorous state-level environmental protections in the nation. We have long had, for example, wetlands can be protected federally. We have our own wetland protection law, okay? And so there is nothing in that congressional action that happened in April of this year that changes Minnesota's laws. Our environmental review work, our permitting work is all grounded in state statute, not federal. It's state statute, state rules, state policies, which require, very rigorous science, and it requires extensive public input.
Wolves are a fascinating topic for many Minnesotans. It is, and I hear a lot of chatter about this just amongst friends, local community. What are some of the biggest myths about wolves, and what does the science actually tell us about Minnesota's wolf population?
Yeah, well, wolves are one of those natural resources that brings out a lot of emotion, right? Whether you love wolves and there's sort of that mystery around being able to spot one, or, particularly for deer hunters or cattle producers, right? You may experience wolves in a much more negative way. What we do know is wolves are really important to our natural and our cultural heritage in Minnesota too. They are viewed as relatives to our tribal members. It's really important that people understand nobody is talking about mining in the boundary waters. I see that a lot. I see a lot of emails and I hear from people about mining in the boundary waters. And I always want to be really clear, we're not talking about mining in the boundary waters. Having said that, there has been exploration and there have been proposals outside the boundary waters that are within the same watershed as the boundary waters. And so that's the cause of the concern, is if there is, pollution, will it spill in and flow into the boundary waters and alter that experience?
Welcome to Iron and Empathy. I'm your host, Drew Moldenhauer. Iron and Empathy is sponsored by Blue Ethos Specialized Training, a national leader in workplace violence prevention, active threat preparedness, and de-escalation training. At Blue Ethos, we don't just focus on safety. We help organizations improve workplace culture by strengthening communication, increasing situational awareness, and creating environments where people feel supported, empowered, and prepared to intervene early before problems escalate. If this is your first time listening to Iron and Empathy, welcome, and thank you for joining us. Let's get into today's conversation. Today, I am super excited to welcome a very special guest, Sarah Strommen, Commissioner of the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources. Since 2019, Sarah has led an organization of nearly 2,700 employees, dedicated to conserving Minnesota's natural resources, expanding outdoor recreation opportunities, and ensuring these incredible places remain available for future generations. Before becoming commissioner, Sarah built an impressive career in conservation and public service, serving in leadership roles with the DNR, the Board of Water and Soil Resources, Friends of the Boundary Waters Wilderness, and the Minnesota Land Trust. She also served as mayor of Ramsey, Minnesota, where I was a police officer for 12 years, bringing a unique perspective on leadership at both the local and state levels. Beyond the title, Sarah is someone who genuinely loves the outdoors. Whether she's fishing, hunting, or hiking with her family, she lives the mission she leads every day. Sarah, welcome to Iron and Empathy. Where are you joining us from today?
I'm in St. Paul, Minnesota today.
Fantastic. All right. Well, it's a hot one out there, so I hope you got the air conditioning on in there.
I do. It's the air conditioning is always a little bit of a, interesting surprise in an old warehouse building, but it's flowing today and we're cooling up.
Fantastic. Well, that's good to hear. So, well, Sarah, could you tell us a little bit about your background, even though I talked a little bit about in the bio, but what inspired you to lead the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources?
Absolutely. I'm happy to share. And thank you so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. It's great to reconnect with you from our Ramsey days. And you've gone on to do really interesting things, and I have gone on as well. And so yes, I am for the last nearly 8 years been sitting in the chair of the commissioner of the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources. And first of all, I'll just say I'm deeply honored to be serving the state of Minnesota in this capacity. I will say this was not my life's goal to be in this role, but I think, my goal has been, and my career has been to serve the public, to make the communities in which I am part of better, and to share my passion for the outdoors. And so I think there is no better place to pursue that goal than the commissioner's seat. So I went to college at Grinnell College in Iowa. I have a liberal arts degree in biology. I spent some time after that in Costa Rica, and then continued my education and earned a master's of environmental management from Duke University's Nicholas School of the Environment. So very much my academic background is rooted in the natural resources. And then I spent a little bit of time in small business. I spent a large part of my career in the nonprofit sector, as you noted in the intro, and then found a home in state government, first working for the Board of Water and Soil Resources, and then the DNR. And I've been at DNR now since 2015. And it's been a little bit of a journey. I've had a number of various roles and a number of focus, from environmental education to environment and natural resource policy to private land conservation and, organizational management. So I think that breadth of experience has prepared me for this role. And then, as you noted, at the same time, alongside my natural resources career, I became really interested in local government, and so had the honor of serving in the city of Ramsey for nearly 15 years, including 5.5 as mayor. And so, that experience has also shaped a lot of my perspectives on what it means to serve in government. And yeah, that brings us to today. I'll also say that I'm really proud to be the first woman to lead the Department of Natural Resources. So it's been a journey and an honor.
That's fantastic. And no, you were fantastic as a mayor too. I loved when you were in office for us at the city of Ramsey, and I really appreciated that. And you had to go through some tough times too. Like during those times where you were mayor, there was a lot going on. So it was great to have you. So I'm very honored to have you on here, Sarah. Thank you very much. Many people know the DNR for hunting and fishing regulations, but what are some responsibilities people may not realize fall under the DNR?
Yeah. So Minnesota DNR is what folks in other parts of the country call a super DNR, because we are the state's Fish and Wildlife Agency, as you noted. We are also in charge of forestry. We have a forestry division. We manage and operate Minnesota state parks and state trails. We have an enforcement division. We are the state's conservation law enforcement agency. We do the state's lands and minerals work. So we manage 5.6 million acres of public lands across the state. We, steward the state's mineral estate as well. And then we have a ecological and water resources division. So that's our non-game wildlife. People may be most familiar with the chickadee checkoff at tax time, or the eagle cam, which is internationally popular. That comes out of that division. They do our rare species work, as well as our water work. And while water quality is under a different agency, water quantity and sort of how we manage the state's groundwater and our public lakes and streams is under DNR. So we have a very broad reach with Minnesota's natural resources. And, I like to say we affect every Minnesotan, right? We have a huge footprint in terms of Minnesota's quality of life with our natural resources. And we have staff all across the state in all of Minnesota's counties. So it's a big reach. It's a big responsibility. But it's something that we know Minnesotans are really passionate about, all of those resources. So it's also, a great way to be able to interact with Minnesotans around those resources.
Fantastic. And speaking of that, when you're saying just passionate about, the outdoors and that kind of way, I was too when I was just starting as a police officer, and I always wanted to become a conservation officer, and I knew how hard it was. And I'll never forget when I went in to go take the exam, and I'm like, okay, I really want to be a conservation officer, and they were hiring 8. And I went into the Oakdale ballroom and I applied for the job, and there was 1,000 people there for 8 jobs. And I remember when I was walking out, there was people in the actual vestibule kind of hallway in a table there because there was so many in that ballroom to test for it, because it's one of the things that I think is one of the coolest jobs. I remember young in my career researching it. They had the lowest rate of people that would leave, because they loved it so much, and they had their areas and they got to enforce and be out in the woods and everything. And I thought, man, what a great area to get into. So something I always had my eye on. So if you could clear up one common misconception or myth about the DNR, because I'm sure there's a whole bunch and you get these a lot, what would that be, would you say?
Yeah, I get that all the time. There's lots of myths from, right? We've planted wolves in certain parts of the state, or cougars, or that kind of thing. Those are myths. I think the biggest myth I run across kind of collectively is how people view our staff. And the reality is DNR staff are really passionate about DNR's mission, without exception, whether you are a conservation officer or a fisheries technician or an accountant or an architect at our agency. Our folks, without exception, are really committed to the mission. They care very deeply about Minnesota's natural resources and their users themselves. That's what they do in their free time. Yeah. And I think a lot of times, members of the public will see decisions we make and they think they're sort of personal. Somebody liked me or didn't like me. Somebody, liked this issue or didn't like this issue. And the reality is DNR has to follow the law, just like everybody else, right? And our authorities are actually derived from the legislature. So the legislature gives us a certain set of authorities. They're pretty broad, I'll say. But if it hasn't been given us, it hasn't been given to the agency by the legislature, we don't have it. So we are responsible for following the law, following rules. And so sometimes, there just are pieces of decisions that are not within our scope of authority because the law doesn't give us that. And I think sometimes people don't understand that we have bounds on our authority too. And so I think, for me, it's always really important to explain that in the decisions where we may be limited by law or where we've had discretion, and then own that, right? We applied our discretion here, and here's the reason why.
For sure. And you already mentioned it, but just kind of one of the things you talked about, planting the wolves, and wolves are a fascinating topic for many Minnesotans. It is. And I hear a lot of chatter about this just amongst friends, local community. What are some of the biggest myths about wolves, and what does the science actually tell us about Minnesota's wolf population?
Yeah, well, wolves are one of those natural resources that brings out a lot of emotion, right? Whether you love wolves and there's sort of that mystery around being able to spot one, or, particularly for deer hunters or cattle producers, right? You may experience wolves in a much more negative way. What we do know is wolves are really important to our natural and our cultural heritage in Minnesota too. They are viewed as relatives to our tribal members. And we know from public surveys, which we have done, that wolves are really highly valued by Minnesota's public broadly. Again, that changes if you look at, certain sectors. But there's really something that has the attention of, most everyone in Minnesota. So it can be a highly politicized issue. Obviously, They are a federally listed species. So, our management, the suite of management tools we have available to us as a state is limited, because as long as they are federally listed, we are prohibited as a state from having a recreational season for hunting or trapping. We can nuisance wolves can be trapped under very strict conditions. But in Minnesota, the other thing is our history of wolves is really unique, because Minnesota never lost its wolf population, and we are very unique in that. I think outside of Alaska, Minnesota never lost wolves. Wisconsin lost all their wolves. Michigan lost all their wolves. Minnesota did not. So what we know about that wolf range today is the wolf range covers approximately a third of the state. That's probably about as far as it's going to get. Not a lot of great wolf. Wolves are habitat generalists. They can pretty much live anywhere. But as you get to more of the farm country, right, there's less attractive habitat for them. We have just under 3,000 wolves distributed across that wolf range. That is well above what the recovery goal is for delisting from the Endangered Species Act. But we're connected with some other states, right, who don't have that same situation. Again, we're unique. We are well above recovery goals. And we've really seen the population stabilize since about the 1990s. So, we see a little fluctuation year to year. We do regular population surveys. We don't count every single wolf, but, we do a pretty good job of a statistical sample. And so that's what we know about wolves in Minnesota. We also have a nation-leading wolf management plan that we started in 2019. Took us a couple years to do. But that plan really lays out how the state of Minnesota does manage wolves and how we would intend to manage wolves if a delisting occurs. And we had a lot of public input in that. We had a lot of good science and technical information go into that plan. We talked to everyone from cattle producers to deer hunters to Humane Society to tribal partners to get all the views incorporated into their plan. And I think the plan has served us really well. The goal was to make sure it would serve us, whether wolves were listed or not. We've seen that plan help Minnesota navigate some of the politics around wolves and wolf hunting. And so I think Minnesota is in a good place. Again, any individual Minnesotan will have their views depending on their perspective. But I think broadly, Minnesotans should know we know what our wolf situation is here, and we have a plan that we follow.
That's super cool. And I just, as a follow-up question, that's someone that's just ignorant on the subject, because I think wolves are cool, but, again, I'm not on either side of the fence with that. I just think they're a cool animal. But I have seen just kind of randomly on Facebook or something like, hey, we tracked this wolf and you can kind of see all the ways that it went and everything. How does that happen? Like, is that just almost like I always think about it as like almost like an ankle bracelet or something, or what is it that they have? And is there a certain amount of wolves that you're like, hey, we're going to track these ones and give them names and that kind of stuff? Or how does that happen for people that maybe have no idea about that and how that kind of works?
Yeah, so collaring animals to be able to track their movements is a pretty common scientific, population research technique. We do it with animals. We do it with wolves. We do it with deer. We do it with elk. We do it with a number of different animals, again, to understand animals' movement. There are also some independent entities. There's a entity called the Voyageurs Wolf Project, and they also have collared wolves. And so, some of what we know comes from partner entities or academic institutions as well. And it's a good way, particularly with wolves, which are a highly mobile species. Again, very much a habitat generalist. They can use a lot of areas, but especially those kind of lone male wolves, when they get to a certain age and they are looking for their pack, they can travel really long distances. And the reason we know that is because we've collared them and we can, follow the signal and track it on GPS. So it's a really good tool to understand how animals move, how they interact with other animals, and then how we can make better management decisions with that data we get.
Okay, and do you guys do the same thing with fish? Because I swear I've caught a couple fish and they'll have like some pins in it with a number, and I'm like, that is the strangest looking thing I've ever seen. So I've seen that. I was just curious. Okay, same thing with fish then too.
Same thing with fish. Yeah, they'll put little tags in them, and then we can understand movement. And so we do it both on native fish to understand population dynamics. We've been doing it recently with invasive carp in the river to understand more about how these fish are moving in the river systems in Minnesota.
Very cool. And speaking of fishing, I mean, this is a big one that always comes up, right? Mille Lacs Lake has seen its share of changes over the years. How would you describe the health of the lake today, and what gives you optimism for its future, would you say?
So Mille Lacs Lake is it's another really unique resource in Minnesota. And I came to DNR in 2015, and that was the year we actually had to close the lake to walleye fishing because we had a population crash that year. So I've seen it from some very low points to now, which I think is a very high point and very optimistic point for the future of the lake and its fisheries resource. So Mille Lacs, as I said, it's unique. It is our second largest inland lake in Minnesota. It's known for phenomenal walleye catch rates. Obviously also offers a number of other trophy fishing opportunities from muskie to bass, both smallmouth and largemouth. And because of those reasons and its proximity to the Twin Cities, it gets a very high amount of use. All it takes, both in the summer and the winter, which is unique too among our large lakes. And all it takes is, one person to put out on social media, there's a hot bite, and right within a couple hours, lots of people can be there. So it makes management, from that standpoint, a little bit challenging just because it gets so many angler hours every year. And then of course there's the other unique factor, which it is a resource that is shared with, tribal partners. And so, there are a number of both Minnesota and Wisconsin tribes that retain fishing rights there through the 1837 treaty that has been through the courts and well established. And so we actually have a prescribed process that we go through every year with the tribes to determine the amount of harvest that can happen sustainably on the lake. And then that harvest gets divided, and then the tribes figure out, their fishing seasons based on their allocation, and the state figures out our seasons based on our allocation. So as I said, in 2015, we were up against that cap. We actually had to close the lake to walleye fishing. We had a number of years that if we opened it, it was catch and release only. And now, we've slowly been able to build a population back, I think have better understanding about the effects of zebra mussels in the lake. We share, both the tribal and state biologists are, doing a lot of research and understanding of the lake. And I think that's helped. This year now we have, state anglers have the opportunity to harvest 3 walleyes, and there's some slot limits to that. But, to go in 10 years from 0 walleye harvest to being able to harvest 3, I think that's an incredible turnaround, and I really do credit the care and tenacity of both the tribal and state biologists to really think about the short-term needs of anglers and the communities around the lake that depend on that resource for business and livelihood, but also have that long-term view in mind, because I think it clearly is working. So the story's still being written, but I think there's a lot to celebrate around Mille Lacs.
I 100% agree, because that was when I was traveling around the state and going to, the different bars and you're going ice fishing and stuff. That was a huge talking point at that time. So I'm sure that was a big project right when you got into office to deal with that. But that's incredible to go from catch and release to being able to have a 3, limit walleye every day, that's good management as far as bringing that population back, I believe. So that's really cool to hear. Thank you for sharing about that, because that is one of the things that I still hear people talk about, not as much as, 2015, like you were talking about, but that's great. Sarah, you said the Boundary Waters is one of Minnesota's greatest treasures, and it sounds like you might have served on some boards with that. What makes it so special, and what information could you share about the current situation regarding mining up there and some of the other issues that people are talking about?
We're just hitting all the hot topics: wolves, Mille Lacs, Boundary Waters.
Absolutely.
Well, it's great because I think, I think it demonstrates how many real treasured resources Minnesota has, and the passion that Minnesotans feel around that, right? And I often tell our staff, sometimes that passion comes through as enthusiasm, and sometimes it comes through as frustration, and you get to deal with it all. So,
Yes.
Obviously, I mean, the Boundary Waters is one of Minnesota's and one of our country's most treasured places. It is a very unique wilderness situation with being a canoe country and being so water focused. And, people come from all over the world to experience that very unique opportunity to travel by canoe with little short spurts of land in between, and to experience the solitude and, as I said, that kind of healing experience that water gives us, right? And I mean, anybody who's spent time in the Boundary Waters knows what that feeling is like. So a couple things I'll say, we all want to protect the Boundary Waters. I think Minnesotans are united in that aspect. I think where the difference of perspectives comes in is like what happens immediately outside the Boundary Waters, and how does that influence the experience that people have inside the Boundary Waters. So first, I think it's really important that people understand nobody is talking about mining in the Boundary Waters. I see that a lot. I see a lot of emails and I hear from people about mining in the Boundary Waters. And I always want to be really clear. We're not talking about mining in the Boundary Waters. Having said that, there has been exploration, and there have been proposals outside the Boundary Waters that are within the same watershed as the Boundary Waters. And so that's the cause of the concern, is if there is, pollution, will it spill in and flow into the Boundary Waters and alter that experience. I think it's also important for people to know that there is no proposal in front of DNR at this moment for any kind of mine in the proximity of the Boundary Waters. And I think that's important because that means there's nothing imminent, right? We don't even have a proposal. And so there's a lot of concern right now due to a U.S. congressional action that reversed a Biden-era mineral withdrawal. So during the Biden administration, the U.S. Forest Service and land management agencies sort of took mining off the table for a period of time. What people should know here in Minnesota is that in Minnesota, we have among the most rigorous state-level environmental protections in the nation. We have long had, for example, wetlands can be protected federally. We have our own wetland protection law, right? And so there is nothing in that congressional action that happened in April of this year that changes Minnesota's laws. Our environmental review work, our permitting work is all grounded in state statute, not federal. It's state statute, state rules, state policies, which require, very rigorous science, and it requires extensive public input from the public. It requires extensive public input from and consultation with our tribal nations and others. And so none of that process, that rigorous, long process, has even begun, because at this time there are no proposals for non-ferrous, which is copper nickel mining projects in that Rainy River watershed. And so, the very first step would be for there to be a proposal, and then that would kick off this process. So I think should people be concerned about the Boundary Waters? Do we want them to care about it? Absolutely. And should people be concerned that some kind of mine proposal on the doorstep is imminent?
Okay. Well, I have to say thank you because now I'm way more informed because I didn't know any of this, right? I mean, you hear the news once in a while and it's like, oh my gosh, they're literally just going to go right into the boundary waters and mine and stuff. So thank you for clearing a lot of that up, the misconceptions along with that. Secondly, I have to tell you, I am so embarrassed because I live in the state of Minnesota, lived here my entire life. I was a Boy Scout, Eagle Scout, a little humble brag there. Okay. And there are 3 high adventure camps throughout the entire nation, and that is Florida Sea Base, Philmont, New Mexico, and then the Boundary Waters. I did 2 of the 3. I did Philmont and I did Sea Base. Never did Boundary Waters, and it's in my own backyard. So I was so embarrassed about that, but my girlfriend I have now, her and her family are taking me up there in September. That's when they say is the best time to do it. And they're really excited about it. I am too. Never been there, just heard really, really good things about it. And as I've traveled, I was in Colorado a couple of years ago, snowboarding. And as I was snowboarding, I was talking to some of the locals. And when they found out I was from Minnesota, right away, they're like, Boundary Waters. So you got to go to the Boundary Waters. And I'm like, I still haven't been there, and I'm 41 now, so it's just one of those things I'm really excited about too. People talk about it a lot. I mean, wherever you go, that is one of the things we're known for. So I can see the passion behind what people talk about with that, and they really, really enjoy it. So thank you for clearing some of that up, Sarah. I really appreciate it. What is one Minnesota animal or natural resource that you think people often misunderstand besides, we talked about wolves, we talked about Mille Lacs, we talked about boundary waters. Is there anyone else that you can think of that is maybe misunderstood when it comes to an animal or resource?
Well, I think there's lots of them, and I'm going to answer it a little bit differently. I think often the misunderstanding occurs when data that we collect as scientists don't match the experience that people have outside, right? So I hear all the time from deer hunters, I didn't see any deer while I was out in my deer stand. There must not be any in my area. And yet I can see the population surveys, right, that our wildlife staff do, and I can say there are plenty of deer there. So right, there's a disconnect there. I think this was a huge factor in a lot of the controversy and debate about Mille Lacs, again, back in 2015, 2016, 2017. Our data, right, would show a decline in the spawning population of walleye. But people were out there and they're saying, I'm out on the lake, I'm fishing every day, I see plenty of walleye. How do you say there are no walleye in the lake? Right. And what I've come to learn is when we say, but our data show this, and somebody is seeing or experiencing something different, you're never going to convince them, right? That their experience didn't happen, or what they're seeing or not seeing, in the case of not seeing any deer, didn't happen, right? And so I think part of it is really important on our part to reframe that conversation, to explain how both the data and people's experiences are true, because that's the reality of it, right? If people are experiencing it, that's real. Our data also are real. And I think that was the case in the Lacs, right? Both things were true. They seemed to be at odds, but in reality, they were both true. And I think that is the root of a lot of misunderstandings about natural resources or particular things, as people's personal experience doesn't match a broader thing. And we've got to reconcile that for people to help build understanding.
That makes sense. Okay. No, that's great. You're absolutely right. And I think people have a misconception about that, but that's a great point. And, you and I have talked about this a little bit off script, about the beautiful places we have here, in Minnesota. Itasca Park is one of my favorite, but what are a few hidden outdoor gems around Minnesota that you think more people should experience? That's one of those ones that maybe isn't as popular as Itasca Park, right? Or one of those ones. What's one of those ones that you think is a good hidden gem that you think people should experience?
Yeah, I'm going to offer a few. There are so many. As I said, we manage 5.6 million acres of land in Minnesota. So there is a hidden gem everywhere. And that's just ones DNR manages, not to mention, local outdoor opportunities. So I'm going to rattle off a few, if that's okay. Paved State Park by Spring Valley, southern Minnesota. It has over 13 miles of underground passages. It's something that I never visited until a couple years ago because I work here and I had the opportunity. But especially like in this kind of heat here in Minnesota. Perfect way to get into those caves and beat the heat because the temperature is a constant 48 degrees. So Mystery Cave State Park is one. I think if you love Itasca State Park but want to get away from the crowds, LaSalle Lake, there's both a state recreation area and a scientific natural area there at the confluence of LaSalle Creek and the Mississippi River. Some really cool opportunities there. Our scientific natural areas really are not primarily recreation areas, but they are very cool, unique resources. You can recreate there under certain rules. And they tend to be kind of those hidden gems that people don't know about and don't get a lot of use. The Lost 40 Scientific Natural Area in Itasca County is another one. It is due to a surveying error long ago, was never logged. And so there's an incredible old growth red and white pine resource there. And actually there is a maintained trail there you can take. And I think that one is super cool just because you will see these trees, of amazing size that it's hard to find elsewhere. And then lastly, I'll just put in a pitch broadly for our wildlife management areas. We manage about 1.4 million acres of wildlife management areas across the state. And they obviously provide in their name, they provide habitat for wildlife. They provide hunting opportunities, but also wildlife watching and those kind of activities too. The Keystone WMA in Washington County, close to the Twin Cities Metro, one of our newest ones. It's 1,800 acres. It's a really cool new WMA. And I have to put in a plug there because we are celebrating the 75th anniversary of Minnesota's wildlife management area system this year. So that's really a milestone. The system was came out of a citizen-led effort. So I think it's also just a good nod to, Minnesota's civic commitment to stewarding lands and habitat and resources in Minnesota.
That's fantastic. And thank you for sharing a lot of these. I went to school down in southwestern Minnesota and Marshall and everything, that Mystery Cave. I've never heard of that. So that is really cool. I want to check that out. And I've heard of the Lost 40, never been there. And I taught in Bemidji for a little bit. So that's pretty cool. These are just great.
You got to check it out. And the cool thing is our website actually makes it really easy to find things. You can go, there's a whole page of the scientific natural areas and it'll tell you how to find them. Same with state parks and same with WMAs. There's actually a little WMA finder tool. So you can search, by county, you can search by resource, you can search by hunting opportunity. It's a great way to just, especially I like to do it if I'm going to be in a certain part of the state, to look up what's nearby and check out something new.
Fantastic. And I just have two last questions for you, Sarah. I'm going to admit this first one's a little bit tougher just because as your job, what you have as the commissioner, you're dealing, like you were talking about, a lot of emotions, but then you have the science and you have natural resources. There's a lot of passion in that area. So the DNR serves people with many different perspectives and passions, but how do you lead with empathy while making decisions that impact so many Minnesotans?
Yeah. I think the first thing is to remember that Minnesotans share a common passion for our natural resources. And as I said before, sometimes that passion comes out as frustration. Sometimes it comes out as enthusiasm, but at its core, it's related to a passion. We are all, connected to the outdoors in some way in Minnesota. So I think it's really important to listen to the perspectives that people are bringing forward. I think it's important to have conversation with people who bring diverse perspectives, and particularly to do it where they live and to experience their perspective, in person. And so I spend a lot of time traveling around the state, and that is the part I enjoy most, is seeing Minnesota's resources through the eyes and experiences of people who have very diverse perspectives or live in very different parts of our state and maybe seeing different resources. And then I think it's, as I've said before too, I think it's really important for us as decision makers to explain the why we make decisions, right? We don't, for example, issue water permits because we can or because we want to micromanage. We have permitting authority because Minnesotans value our waters in this state. That is a value we share. The Minnesota legislature has enshrined that in policy, and our permitting authority comes from that place. So we may differ in the mechanics, right, of how much of a permit, where, and what mitigations are. But at the core, that authority comes from the fact that we all care about our water. So I think it's important to remember that and to bring that forward in conversations with Minnesotans and in conversations about decisions. And the last thing I'll say about this is I'm embarrassed to say I actually was with DNR for many years before I really looked at our mission statement and the first few words, which start, we work with Minnesotans. We work with Minnesotans. And then it goes on to talk about the three parts of our mission and what we do. But I think that is a value in and of itself to say, as a state agency, we're not just here to make decisions for you. We're not here to represent you without talking with you. We work with Minnesotans. And so I try to live that every day. I think that's part of that empathy you're talking about. And when you focus on those words, it kind of makes you do the work in a little bit different way.
I love that answer. I absolutely love that answer. And it took me till later in my policing career to understand that too. As you know, I started off as this young cop and it's just everything is enforcement. We're law enforcement officers. But as you start to get more experience and everything, you're dealing with some of these people and a lot of emotions. And when you really take a step back and look at their side of things and what they're going through, it gives you that compassion and that empathy to say, okay, yeah, these are human beings we're dealing with, and there's a lot of emotion behind this. And when you lead with that empathy, just like you talked about, that is so important. So I absolutely love that. Working with Minnesotans. I love that. I'm going to steal that. So just so you know. All right. And then lastly, and this is kind of a common sense one, but maybe there's something that you could give us some insight on this, is if every Minnesotan could just do one simple thing to help protect our state's natural resources. You know, we learned this as a Boy Scout, always, pick up and leave something better than how you found it. But what would you encourage people to do?
I think I'd say to do something that's individually meaning to you.
Okay.
Right. There are so many ways to help and to support our state's outdoor spaces and natural resources. So whether it's visiting an outdoor space and connecting, whether it's volunteering with the DNR or another organization, and we have tons of really cool volunteer opportunities. Buying a hunting or fishing license helps to fund a lot of conservation work, or there's, for people who are really into it, there's whether you do it individually or enroll in a program that helps you restore your lakeshore or restore your property. There's programs like that. So I think that's part of what is great, is you can help protect our natural resources in a variety of different ways. And I just think it's important for people to do something that's personally meaningful to them.
That's awesome. That's great. And Sarah, I ask every guest this, and if you don't have it on the top of your head, that's fine. But can you recommend 2 books for my audience that you think that they should read?
I can.
Okay.
So the first one might be a little hard because I know it's out of print, but it's a great book. It's Nick-Elligott's Pool by Dr. Seuss. It's a kid's book.
Okay, cool.
What I love about it is it's about a child who is fishing, and the story is really about this kid who has a great imagination about what might be possible to catch out of this little kind of junky pond. And I think it says a lot about kind of the potential of our natural resources. And it says a lot about, right, the hope and imagination that kids have. And I think we could all use some of that. So that is a great book. The other one that I really recommend was actually written by a former colleague of mine from Minnesota Land Trust, a friend of mine, Frances Fitzgerald. I think he's F.J. Fitzgerald on the book, but it's called Combat to Conservation. And it's about his experience serving in the Marines. And then when he came back from Vietnam, carving out a career in the conservation community, and what conservation in natural spaces have meant to him, not just as a professional, but as a Marine who served in Vietnam, and what that meant for personal healing too. And it is a great story of his experiences, and really powerful in terms of its description of what nature can mean for people and how it can heal us from really traumatic experiences.
Gosh, I love that. And, there's all this stuff now talking about exactly what you're talking about, forest bathing. And there is that feeling when you're out on the water, or when you're in that deer stand, that does way more than just what you're actually out there for. It's incredible. So the work you're doing is awesome. How can people get a hold of your office, Sarah? Is there a way that they could email your office, or how could people get a hold of you if they have some questions?
Yeah, absolutely. Minnesota DNR has a website. And so on that website, there's contact information for my office. And for me personally, there's also contact information for, resource people all across the department. If you want to reach enforcement, or you want to reach fisheries, whether it's somebody local or somebody here in our central office in St. Paul. So that's probably the best way. We're also as DNR available on a number of social media channels. And so we always invite people to subscribe there and interact with us there as well.
Fantastic. And Sarah, thank you so much for coming on Iron and Empathy today. I really appreciate your time with this, and just clearing up some of those myths and talking about the DNR and how important this is to all of us Minnesotans. Really, really appreciate that. And for all of our listeners out there, until next time, keep leading with strength, empathy, and purpose. I'm Drew Moldenhauer, and this is the Iron and Empathy Podcast.